Yes, I'm calling because of a video game that I bought for Christmas for my son. Tiger Woods 99. It's a golf game for his PlayStation console. The thing is, a few days ago, I saw him put the game disc in our family computer. I don't know how or why, but a kids cartoon with kids swearing and saying all kinds of profanity started playing out loud. I mean, what kind of company would publish something evil like this?
What you just heard is the reconstruction of a real call that was made on January 14, 1999, to a local radio station in Tampa, Florida. And while it sounds like an obvious prank, evil stuff hidden in innocent game is a trope so overused it actually spawned its own weird subgenres by now. But the thing is, this story is actually real. The North American PlayStation version of Tiger Woods 99 actually shipped with a profane cartoonist disc. That cartoon being fucking South Park of all things. I wanted to cover this story for years now, but a very small issue was stopping me from doing that. The following morning, EA recalled and destroyed every single copy of the game, replacing them with almost identical copies that didn't have the South Park shirt. And with the only way to recognize them being the small ISBN number on the box, it was almost impossible for me to actually get a hold of a copy having the South Park shirt in it. Because of this very reason, I just put the video on hold for years. And I felt like the only meaningful way to properly make this video was if I had an actual copy that escaped the purge. And yes, of course, you can easily pirate a dump of this version if you want. But in my opinion, for a documentary to properly tell the story, you need to show the real deal, because the only interesting thing about this is the disc. Or at least, that's what I thought. Okay, so one night I was fucking around, playing some games, listening to some music, and I was talking to a friend on Discord, and I was mentioning this story that I had on hold for years, and I was telling them I didn't want to make the usual video where people go on Wikipedia and just read a story. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, that's boring. So I started checking my notes from years ago, trying to explain to this friend the entire story, and I realized nobody really covered this story in depth, ever. There are mainly three reasons that are often quoted as why EA replaced the discs overnight like the fucking invasion of the body snatchers. The first one being, of course, PR. You don't want a cartoon with Santa fighting Jesus in your kid's golf game. The second one is copyright, because they don't own South Park. And oops, they just shipped thousands of pirate copies of that short without knowing it, so that's a legal problem waiting to happen. And the third one is that this was the first game with a Tiger Woods license, and I definitely didn't want to lose it, because Tiger Woods was genuinely huge in the 90s. This was way before the cheating scandal that happened with his wife that actually landed him a spot in a South Park gag, going full circle. So EA didn't want to throw this money-making cow in the trash. All of these three reasons are perfectly valid, but what really didn't connect with me is that I didn't see any competitors to EA trying to use this story to gain any market share. I mean, this was an easy push, okay? If you're a competitor of EA, you can simply mention they were putting profane cartoons in kids' games and gain some market share, at least with Christian moms. But nobody did. And this is weird. I mean, the video games market is the same one where Acclaim was trying to sell video games by marketing in the tombstone of a dead person. We're talking about this market, okay? So the fact that nobody was trying to exploit this scandal to damage EA is weird. And so I started reading and reading and reading, and I connected the dots. I figured out what was happening. So in this video, we are going to figure out how EA managed to pull off the biggest cover-up in gaming history and how everybody agreed on letting them do that. And we need to start way before Tiger Woods 99. Way before I was born. Actually, way before I was even in my dad's box. The Sony PlayStation wasn't a thing yet. And while you had some minor players, in the US the main console rivalry was between Nintendo and Sega. The Super Nintendo, or Super Famicom in Japan, was launched in August 91 as a way to crush Sega's Genesis and show people who was boss. To which Sega answered, okay, cool, you got 16 bits now, that's cute. But can it play CDs? The Sega CD was a very expensive, how can I put this? Let's say life extension machine for your Genesis. There were some great games that actually used this add-on, like Sonic CD or That Game by the guy who also made that thing. But hardware-wise, it was a dumpster fire. And I mean this literally. Test units, even late into development, were bursting into flames for no reason. But when it wasn't catching fire, it was actually able to make your Sega Genesis read CDs, which was the future. There was one small caveat though. It was very slow. It was okay to read music, but loading lots of game assets started to become complicated. The Sega CD was also able to play video from CD at a very low frame rate, very compressed. This was the worst way ever to watch video. But Nintendo didn't have this. Oh yeah, keep playing that Mario World. We got the best graphics here, humans. Lots of games used video in this manner, but the most famous, or I rather say infamous one, is Night Trap. The plot of this game is kind of insane. You are part of a police squad, which is watching over some teenage girls having a sleepover party. You have to activate traps in order to save them from vampires. Yeah, it's a very weird game. It isn't particularly good. It's basically a teen movie where you get just that little bit of control and several different endings. You can look up a gameplay of this game here on YouTube and it's gonna be pretty much the same as playing it yourself. The reason why I'm talking about this at all is that this game, this horny teen movie thing, caused so much controversy, the fucking United States Senate got involved. Between 93 and 94, the US Senate held some hearings about how violent video games were being freely sold to kids and how that was a problem. Now, while today this is basically a joke,
would you please sign my petition?
This was 93, the year when Doom came out on PC and Mortal Kombat was ported over to game consoles.
Martial arts contest involving digitized characters. Blood splatters from the contestants' heads. Instructs the player to finish, and I quote, finish his opponent.
The Genesis version was an almost identical port, and by simply inputting a cheat code you could re-enable the blood, so you can imagine how parents felt considering this was sold to every kid with no restrictions in every toy store. And to really push down Sega and tell them, look, you're fucking up real bad, the Senate used a clip from Night Trap, the game, the teen movie game, where a girl gets kidnapped in her bathroom by several masked men, trying to escape to no avail. They were trying to say that this was part of the gameplay, that you were intended to do this. But this is just false, it's not true. The video they showed is part of a game over screen. You only see this when you fail at the game completely.
I put the lives of those girls in your hands, and you screwed up.
The sheer idea of this scene being in a video game a kid could play was horrifying to most parents. So the strategy effectively worked. Parents were outraged and the Senate asked various companies and various psychologists what had to be done on this matter, how together America could stop kids playing a Sub-Zero.
No one beats Sub-Zero.
How they could stop kids from buying these games. However, Nintendo and Bill Sega here were both interviewed for this hearing, and they tried to just use this as another way to shield their products, to which the Senate essentially just answered, look, we don't care about your divorced parents shit. You either figure out a way to make this work and to avoid kids buying these games, or the government will have to do it. So since no companies want the government snooping around, after some negotiations and the entire video game industry trying to figure out how to make this work, they finally struck a deal with the Senate, leading to the creation of something you're probably very familiar with, the Entertainment Software Rating Board. Now, I could make some jokes to tell you what the ESRB is, or I could have the guy from the game tell you about it.
I love sports, but you gotta know what games are right for you. Same with computer and video games. That's why parents have to make sure each game is right for their kids. How? Check the rating. Every computer and video game has a rating symbol that tells you what age group the game is best for. There's also a content label that tells you what's in the game. When you check the rating, the control's in your hand.
ESRB ratings are a quick way to tell parents if a game is safe for kids, or if it has inappropriate stuff like drugs, swear words, guns, or sex on TV. On the surface, this was a very small change, but if we look at the bigger picture, we can see publishers started getting a bit paranoid about the contents of their games because of these ratings. Developers now often had to cut features from games because having them could lead to a higher ESRB rating, which means less sales, so Yeah. Have you ever wondered why you can't kill kids in Fallout 3? Okay, this makes me sound like a monster, but what I mean is that you can nuke an entire town, so you can kill everyone in that town. But kids? No, they are invincible. Well, the ESRB is the reason. By doing this, the game avoided getting an 18+ rating and managed to land a 17+, which makes a huge difference in final sales. This is also the reason why Rare, the makers of one of the best FPSs ever made, was stuck for a while only making kid-friendly games. You should now have an idea of how paranoid companies were getting after all of this happened, but as one white rapper said once, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Back in the 90s and even now, EA's golden goose were licensed sports games. As you can clearly see here from their stock price graph, the line was going up. They were making so much fucking money, selling games like, well, Tiger Woods 99. Sports games are almost always E for everyone, so this entire ESRB thing wasn't really affecting them at all. And to understand how everything worked, let's take a look at how they were marketing and selling these games. Step number 1 is releasing your sports game during the fall. And it's obviously not because kids are going back to school and Christmas is just in a few months and you have commercials running on every single channel and oh wow, some rich kid at the school already got the cool game as soon as it dropped and is making the other middle class kids envious. But don't worry, these middle class kids are gonna ask Santa Claus for the game for Christmas. Step number 2. Santa Claus. When the boomer dad of kid name here gets to know about his gaming desires, he is struck by PTSD because he was there. He was watching the 93 Senate hearings live. He was there. But then he remembers that the Senate made those damn game companies pay and that the ESRB was burned. He checks the rating. And for that game, it is luckily E for everyone. And so kid name here gets the game for Christmas, and everyone is happy until next year. What a nice, cozy story. And how convenient that the ESRB rated that sports game E for everyone. But I can't help myself but wonder, who is the ESRB? Okay, so we are on Wikipedia now, we are on the ESRB page, and they say here that it was founded by the Entertainment Software Association. Who the fuck are these guys? Let me see. Oh, it's the game companies in a trench coat, I guess. Now, to be very clear, I am not trying to bash on self-regulation. When it comes to video games, only video games, I am not siding with Mr. House here. Self-regulation can be way better than having the government mess around. The best example for this is Germany, where for the longest time, any depiction of violence was rendered illegal. You could go to jail for selling Doom. I'm not kidding. Companies had to heavily censor every video game, leading to stuff like German Half-Life, where you can't kill humans. They just sit on the floor and nod, or have a fate worse than death. The military grunts are also replaced by robots, as a way to convey how dehumanizing war is and how it literally turns you into a replaceable machine. No, yeah, I just made this up. They were being censored. This is why I am personally against the government trying to censor media. It can completely transform art into something else. I want kids to be safe, but I'm a grown-ass adult. I want to be able to play Manhunt 2 if I want to. That said, the ESRB and self-regulation are far from perfect. You are effectively having a bunch of companies decide what's okay for kids and what's not. The ESRB is technically an independent entity, but it is still controlled by those companies, so I am not 100% able to trust them on what they do. And there's also the issue of market control, because the ESRB rates games by all companies, even ones that are making competitors to the companies that control the ESRB. So let's say that company A makes a baseball game and is also part of the ESRB, okay? And company B comes to the ESRB and tells them, hey, can you rate our baseball game? We are not in the ESRB. I mean, yeah, the ESRB is supposed to give them a fair rating, but yeah, I can't avoid seeing problems here. And this entire thing is why I think EA was very scared. In 1999, the ESRB was 5 years old. It was very young. It was still something that people were getting used to. And you can add to that that most parents don't know who is behind the ESRB. They probably see this serious-looking symbol on boxes and assume the government is regulating these games, but it's often actually the same companies that make the games. So there was a potential big problem here, because EA sold a game with the E for Everyone rating on it that contained profane cartoons. This was potentially a new night trap situation. If the general public caught wind of this and it blew up, the Senate could potentially lose trust in the ESRB and start censoring games on their own. It wasn't just EA getting fucked, it was the entire gaming industry. Again, this is the reason why this entire scandal had to be covered up and why those copies disappeared. Okay, so EA was very scared, but the copies were immediately recalled as soon as they verified this thing happened. So we are good, right? Yes, EA did act as soon as they got the news, and that's good on their side. The problem is that the game got released on October, and the Florida mom call was in January. So there is like a holiday in the middle there where people exchange gifts.
You better not shout, you better not cry, you better not pout, I'm telling you why. EA's got 'em.
Okay, so let's try and get an idea of how much EA was fucked. By doing some basic googling, it's very easy to find the 1999 EA Investors Report, where they clearly say the game was a success. And there is even a Wall Street Journal article praising EA for the collaboration because of the huge sales. And when you consider sports games bulk sell during the Christmas season, and that every single Christmas copy was technically to be recalled, I'm gonna be very generous and say EA now had to deal, aside from the recall, okay, so all the copies pulled from stores and destroyed, they had at least 100,000 customers that already had the game in their household. And it's not like they can call them and say,
Hi, it's EA support. Your kid's game actually has profane cartoons. You gotta give it back to us.
that would be PR suicide. You can't do that. They couldn't even deny this, because if you deny something, people are going to look for it. So what they did was, quote unquote, taking responsibility. If you try and look for the articles about this story at the time, they all say something like,
Users can only view the cartoon by putting the compact disc and performing a sophisticated computing technique.
alright, so you heard the British man over here. That was a quote from the San Francisco Business Times, and basically every newspaper was pretty much saying this in their own words, which someone could say, allegedly, in a way that doesn't get me sued, might be something EA told them to write. Like, yeah, just say this. Just parents don't have to worry because their son has to be at least John Connor. They probably gathered their entire legal team there and told them, look, you need to tell us an excuse right now, something that can make parents not sue us. And they just came up with this, which I guess worked. And I think that's mostly because the other companies didn't want to risk having the Senate snooping around the ESRB. But considering how it went with Night Trap, I don't think this would actually hold up in court or against the actual Senate. So they got lucky they didn't get busted. But how difficult it is in reality to access the file in the disk. Unfortunately, I don't have the disk. Well, problem solved, I guess. I have the disk now. And I know you're gonna be like, Femi, how the f did you get it? You told us it was impossible to get it in Kismesh Town, Europe, where you live. Yes, that's true. I got some help. But to explain that, let's get in the right mood. And by that I mean let's commit plagiarism for a second. Alexa, what's the name of that Dankboat's music that he puts in videos? Not Scarlet Fire, the other one.
Okay, searching for the... No, you know what? Do it yourself, you stupid piece of shit.
Alright, I'll do it myself, I guess. So in the intro part of this video, I told you about me talking to a friend about this project. And that friend is hitsujigoods, which you might know for lots of stuff really, but most importantly, she recently made a dating simulator where you where you date a neat girl. And I think that kind of explains why she's a cool person. So what happened is that out of nowhere, she binges my entire channel. We were already friends, okay, we already talked. But one day she binges my entire channel and then she asks me, hey, do you want any help getting anything for maybe a future video of yours? And she just straight up managed to find me the disc. She saved the day, basically. And she also is the voice of the mom you heard, like, in the first second of the video. That's her. I have to say, this is the most unassuming rare game ever. If you found this in a thrift shop, you probably would have no idea of this being any rare. There's also this jump scare of Tiger Woods being here when you remove the disc. Anyway, I have confirmed this is the right copy. It's the North American first release of the game. And the way you check for that, the way you see if you actually got a copy with South Park is you check the ISBN number here on the box. Can you see it? Okay, yeah, it's this one, I'm sorry. So it has to match this number, which I'm also gonna put in the description. But being a sports game, it is likely that this can be swapped with a jewel case that's identical, but it's from the recall version with a different ISBN number. So the definitive way to actually know for sure if you got the copy with South Park is looking at this number here on the disc. So you gotta look at the disc. I love that the first thing you see when you open the jewel case is this NASCAR game advertisement. It's like they're trying to say, okay, I get it. You got this for Christmas. Don't worry, we also make cool games. If you just play this game on a PlayStation, it's just a golf game, okay? There's nothing to see here. To get access to the short, you gotta put this disc in your computer drive. Speaking of which, when I was 10, Steve Jobs made every computer thinner by putting in SSDs and removing DVD drives. So my computer now doesn't have one. I do have a USB one, which I usually use for this kind of stuff, but it's suddenly been making this weird noise, and yeah, I'm not putting my rare PS1 game into a Skrillex base. Alright, so I was meditating, and by meditating I mean rewatching all Top Gear episodes for some reason. And there was this scene, which is weird even to describe, where Jeremy Clarkson takes a V8 engine and makes a blender out of it. Then James May drinks some juice made out of meat. It's very weird, but this actually inspired me. I could make my own V8 CD drive and actually read the disc. And the equivalent of a V8, so something loud, overpowered, and that consumes way too much fuel, when it comes to a CD drive, is a PlayStation 3. Years and years ago now, I made a video on how the PlayStation 3, when soft-modded, is a great console. You can do whatever you want with it. And that whatever you want also includes being able to work as an FTP server, where you can read everything that's either on it or connected to it. And that means also being able to read discs if they are in the PS3 drive. So if I put my Tiger Woods game in my PS3 and then I connect my computer to my PS3, I have a very loud, obnoxious, and power-hungry CD drive.
Sometimes my genius is almost frightening.
Okay, so this is weird, probably if you're not used to FTPing, but what I'm doing here is essentially using my PS3 as a computer drive connected to my network because I don't have any DVD drives. But what you're seeing here is exactly what you would see if you just put your CD in a computer drive. I just don't have one, and I want this video to get out soon, hopefully. So let me show you the mad hacker skills you gotta have to access this short. Step 1 is you gotta open the biggest file in the root, which is not really well hidden. It's this zzdummy one. You open it with VLC or any media player, and that's it. There is no step 2. It's that easy. You just double click on the biggest file on the disk and you open it with media player. This is definitely the most computing technique of all time. Also, the video is compressed in Cinepack, which is one of the earliest video codecs ever made. Number 1, it was the codec used by the Sega CD, making this video full circle. Number 2, every version of Windows Media Player can play this format. When I was a kid with a super slow internet connection, I remember trying to kill time by just opening random files I found in game folders. And I know this was common with my friends too, so it's not me being the weird one here, or maybe my entire friends group is weird, but you get the point. It was pretty common. Which means EA was saying bullshit. They knew this was bullshit, and were just trying to cover their ass. And I'm very happy they did it, because a few years later, another company didn't. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, the best-selling game on PS2, I need to remind you, had a remove game mode where you could have, let's say, a very hot coffee with your girlfriend. Now, let's make this clear. This entire game mode is not accessible in the retail version of the game. It's a leftover from early development, it's unfinished, there is no way if you own a Game Shark you can re-enable an unfinished beta version of this minigame and try it out. I need to remind you, the Game Shark is not authorized or sold or endorsed by Sony or Nintendo or anyone. This is way more difficult to do than just putting the game in your computer and browsing. But this was a scandal, okay? Hillary Clinton managed to pass the Family Protection Act based on this, on a removed asset. The ESRB rating of the game was raised too, even though this wasn't something that you were supposed to access, you were hacking into the game. So if this was a scandal and you had to hack into the game to find it, you had to buy something Sony was telling you not to buy, then you can imagine how huge Tiger Woods would have been in Senate, since you only had to put the disc in your computer and you got South Park. And with that said, we explored every single piece of official info. I actually wanted to know who put this here and if it was intentional or not, but I think we'll never figure this out because EA tried to investigate on this, but they will never tell us what happened. Almost 25 years have passed, and for once, I am honestly satisfied with letting this one go. I don't want any other Senate hearings about kitchen guns. Oh god, this video sucks. You're me, right? Yeah, I'm you. I'm editing your clips. So I am just a voice clip. I'm not a person. I am something that was recorded in the past. You are me. I know you watched Blade Runner, okay? I shouldn't explain this. I know you hate me, okay? I'm younger than you. I will always be younger. I will be immortal. I'm a voice clip. I can't physically die. It's not about that. Then what? I think we could have gone way deeper than this. So this took months, and you're not satisfied with this? You made a fucking video on the ESRB. Look, me. There are channels that just do that. They read stuff of Wikipedia, they make a video about it, and that's it. That's not what we do, okay? We never stop at that. Come on, the story is already interesting like this. You made people wait 6 months now. God damn it, are you... What can you do now? I don't know. Come on, the video is ready. What I might have missed. Can drop it like this. I have an idea. I know what to do. What? Yeah, you're gonna be stuck. I'm sorry. Okay, you're still watching. I gotta be careful because EA might be listening. What I covered until now is all the public confirmed info about the game. It's a cool story by itself, but I wasn't satisfied by this. There are too many unanswered questions and no way to find out what happened behind those closed doors. And since I first heard of this game, there's one small detail in the story that has been bugging me, and I've seen nobody really talk about it or try to go in depth. Tiger Woods 99 was developed by Adrenaline, published by EA Sports, and manufactured by Sony. In 3 months, none of them noticed anything. The Florida mom says her kid discovered this by accident, and I've seen loads of people online speculate she's lying, that it wasn't possible for a kid to find this randomly. But after doing a lot of research, I actually have the opposite theory. I think that only a kid would be able to find this. And it all has to do with the music market in 1999. If you want to hear a song you like today, you just open Spotify and it's right there for you. But back in the 90s, you had to wait until it aired somewhere and you had to tape it. Or you had to spend money. This ain't a big deal if you're an adult, but let's say you're a teenager and you're maybe just lucky enough to have a part-time job.
You have got your whole life to work and only one chance to learn.
I told them to get jobs, Hal.
The value of hard work.
A broke teenager with no money and no hopes had basically 2 options. The first option is to find a plug that can hook you up with some very legit CDs.
Hello?
Let's just say, I know a guy who knows a guy.
This is cool.
Before millennials come storming in the comments, first of all, do it. Comment. You can correct me on anything. I need comments for the algorithm. But I know some of you are going to correct me because I'm a filthy zoomer and...
Back in my days in 99, we used Napster. We are all the Metallica.
Yeah, in January 99, Napster wasn't a thing yet. It wasn't out. Go home, grandpa. There is a second option, which is safer, that you can do in the privacy and comfort of your own home. Sticking things where they don't belong, hoping for the best. And what I mean is this. Doing this. This, of course, doesn't work with every console. The Dreamcast, for example, has a very terrifying message if you put a game disc in a stereo for some reason.
Warning. This disc is for use only on Sega Dreamcast.
And that's a warning for you. Never mistake Crazy Taxi for... But when it comes to PlayStation games, like Tiger Woods 99, most of them actually store music in normal CD tracks, so you can put a PlayStation game in your stereo and listen to the soundtrack. It's very, very cool. It doesn't work with every game, but you gotta keep in mind, this is 1999. There is no YouTube, no Siva Gunner, no Granddad, so being able to just listen to video game music by putting a PlayStation game in a CD player is huge. The PlayStation was also the first console to heavily feature licensed soundtracks. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater OST single-handedly shaped the music taste of an entire generation. So in a pre-Napster world with really expensive music, PlayStation games effectively doubled as free CD albums. You can see why teenagers all over the world were sticking their games in CD players, or sometimes in their computer drive. While lots of kids really wanted this game, some other kids just didn't really care about it.
You got me! Oh yeah!
I think this was the case for the Florida radio mom's son. He played the game for a while, but maybe golf wasn't really his thing. He'd rather shoot demons. But after turning off the console, there's one thing that stuck with him. He wants to listen to this banger without having to golf around. So he puts the game in his computer and tries to find the actual folder in the disk that contains the music. And he notices this file called zzdummy.dat, which is the biggest file on the disk. So he tries to open it with a music player and... yeah, this is not music. This shouldn't be here. So he watches the video over and over and he gets caught. From there, it's only a matter of the mom asking him where he got this weird video from and him telling her, hey, you gave the game to me. It was inside that disc. She gets very upset. She calls the local radio and the rest is history. Okay, so let's take a second, take a breath. We talked about a lot of stuff so far, and I think this theory actually works because look at all these games. I can totally see Sony not checking the content on every single one of them. And we know for a fact EA overworks their employees, so that's probably why they didn't check either. We now have a likely explanation of how a kid discovered this. But another question, perhaps even more important, is how was this hidden here? Why was this hidden here? And was this some sort of Easter egg or just a mistake? And I think the answer to all of these questions lies behind the actual file itself. Now, something you might not know unless you're a fan connaisseur des arts pirates. That probably isn't the correct pronunciation or spelling. But yeah, what you might not know is that most disc-based games from the 5th, 6th and 7th generation are usually full of dummy data, which isn't my own weird way to call data. That's actually its name, because its only purpose is to take up space. It's quite a weird concept, so I'll try to make an example with a real game that you might know. The first Animal Crossing for the GameCube is actually a port of the Japanese Nintendo 64 game Dobutsu no Mori. And if you try to dump the game yourself, or you find a strong and fast-moving stream of words, you can see that the game size is 1.4 gigabytes, which, I mean, makes sense. That's how much a GameCube disc can hold. But if you remove the dummy files from the disc, which, let me tell you again, don't do anything except taking up space, the game size goes down to 19 megabytes. You can remove the disc while playing, and the game is gonna keep running until you turn off your GameCube. This is very, very common. You can do the same with Ridge Racer for the PS1. You can even put your own music CD there and make your own custom soundtracks. This is quite cool by itself, but I can't help but wonder, why? Why were disc-based games full of crap that took up space for no reason? And how was someone able to hide South Park in one of these? After way too much research, I actually have a defined answer, and it is back in the 80s. In 1982, Philips and Sony were very close. Philips released the compact cassette and Sony released the Walkman. You can see why these two were fighting. And their relationship gave us the best possible way to listen to music, the digital compact disc. Back when TV looked like this, a single audio CD could hold 74 minutes of uncompressed digital audio. Let's make it very clear. What Philips and Sony made here was essentially technology from the future. Right now, as I speak, more than 40 years later, we are still using CDs to buy physical music. Music on a CD is written from the inside to the outside, and it is stored in very small pits and lands on the plastic. In a CD player, while a motor makes the disc spin, a laser reads these small pits and lands and turns them into zeros and ones. And since we are human, after all, we can't just read binary data as is, so these zeros and ones are sent to a DAC, which takes them and spits out sound waves. This sounds very complicated, and it is, but all you gotta know for today is that the combined effort of Sony and Philips created the best audio format ever made. And then I saw her face! Compact disc was far better than anything else on the market, and CD players quickly became a must-have for every enthusiast hi-fi system. During the following years, CD players became cheaper and cheaper, and by 1988, 1 in 5 American households had at least one of them.
What is it?
Patrick,
Yes, Gene?
a guy from IBM is here to see you.
Who?
IBM Computers. In the 1980s, home computers started to become more common, and seemingly every company was making their own crap with different architectures and standards. But regardless of what flavor your computer was, it needed some kind of storage media to store your crap in. Most computers were using floppy disks, but some machines even use stuff like audio cassettes. But we're talking about CDs, so to paraphrase Cave Johnson from Portal 2.
The point is, if we can store music on a compact disc, why can't we store
Fucking anything? It's all digital binary data, it's all zeros and ones, so why is Sony only using this for music and not for literally everything else? Well, finally, in 1988, they taught a CD how to commit tax fraud. The CD-ROM was a new version of the CD that, while being physically identical to the CD audio, could hold anything you wanted. To be more precise, 650 megabytes of anything, which was huge. A single CD-ROM was equal to 451 floppy disks. And by 1990, thanks to CDR, you could make your own CDs at home, so you could choose between buying a CD burner or a van. Software was now shipping on CD-ROMs, and when you talk about software, you can't avoid talking about games. And here we get back to the Sega CD. It wasn't the first console add-on to use CDs, but it was probably the most popular one at the time, and it clearly outlined the problems of the medium. You had loads of space, but it was also slow as hell. Starting around 1991, consoles were trying to go 3D, but loading 3D assets from a CD was a nightmare. It was so slow. So the Sega CD was indeed a landmark, and it also proved the point because it made Nintendo panic hard. They wanted to make their own SNES CD thing with blackjack and hookers, so needing some help to do this, they went to Sony, because, I mean, Sony was one of the few companies that made the CD possible. It was the best way to get a great CD drive for the SNES, and Sony delivered. They made a fantastic prototype. The problem is that it was too good. They were scared that Sony would just steal their technologies, because they were definitely able to do so. So behind their back, Nintendo went to work with Philips and thought this would solve the problem. No collaboration with Sony, no possible rivalry, right? Nintendo. Yeah, Sony didn't take this lightly. I mean, they were being betrayed not just by Nintendo, but by Philips too. This was horrible. So they took the CD technology they were developing for Nintendo, they threw out the SNES hardware, and they made a 3D capable console. But it was a 3D console running off CDs, so nobody was really worried about this. Like, the Panasonic 3DO had just came out, and it sucked. Loading 3D assets from a CD, turn them into slideshows. This is supposed to be Need for Speed. Where the f*** is the speed? Sony was making something like this. Nintendo didn't have to worry. Yeah, except Sony actually knew how to project hardware. It's fair to say Nintendo was... Okay, but how was the PlayStation able to do this? And how is this related to the golf game thing? The rate speed of a standard CD-ROM drive is around 150 kilobytes per second, which isn't nearly enough to stream 3D assets reliably without the game turning into a slideshow. So what the Sony engineers did were actually two very simple things. The first one was just spin the disc faster, which sounds very, very stupid, but these were the early days after all, and just by doing that, they gained another 150 kilobytes per second of rate speed. 300 kilobytes per second is an improvement, but it's still way too slow to stream 3D assets from a disc. So the second thing they did is actually what matters. It's the secret Krabby Patty Sony sauce that makes this work, and that's going to be copied by everyone after Sony proved it worked perfectly. And the secret sauce is making you stare at the screen for a few seconds. Yeah, this is what the cool kids at the Sony high school called loading screens. Let's say you click new game on your favorite neat girl dating simulator, okay? When you click on that button, the PlayStation tells you to wait a second, maybe read some stuff about the game, and while you're reading, it copies the stuff it needs for the level you're about to play from this slow CD-ROM to its super fast internal memory, which is obviously even faster than the Nintendo 64 cartridge speed. And even after copying everything to RAM, the PlayStation can still keep reading some stuff from disk, and it does this with music, for example, which doesn't need to be read super fast. This is also the reason why when a PlayStation game is super scratched, it plays fine, but the music skips, like an old vinyl record. It's because the game assets are actually copied in the RAM, it's not reading them from the disk, while the music is being streamed in real time, so you're going to read every single scratch and you're going to hear it because the PlayStation has no time to do error correction. So we're good now. With these two simple hacks, the PlayStation can easily do what it can do. Okay, so rewatching this part while editing, I noticed that it needs a bit more clarification or people are going to crucify me in the comments. Every single computer, at least as far as I know, copies programs to its RAM, to its fast memory when they are running. This is not something Sony created. What I meant with this part is that they were educating developers on how to use memory better, because they couldn't rely anymore on getting assets from a cartridge. CD-ROM was slow, so you had to figure out your priorities or your game was going to stutter like hell. That's it. That's what I had to say. Now back to self-aware Family Guy, I guess.
I'm part of a video essay, and this is causing me an existential crisis.
The PlayStation engineers are very smart, but you can't really outsmart physics. When you spin a disc of any kind, given the same rotational velocity, which is essentially the speed you make it spin at, the outer part of it is going to have a faster linear velocity than the center. In layman's terms, speedy... Sorry, I became GLaDOS for a second, that happens. On a CD, the stuff that's around the outer part of the disc is going to be read faster than the stuff that's near the center. And this is a source of every single one of the problems, including our South Park situation. So the way they solved this problem was by using more... Sorry, I still had the top gear tape on. The CD drive spins even faster when the laser has to reach stuff near the center, so it beats physics with pure raw power. But you can't just do that indefinitely, or the drive would go bust in like a few months. And no company will release a console knowing that it could stop working just after a few months, except those other guys, but that's another story. Now, after several iterations, I figured out the best way to explain how Sony managed to solve this is by using a very sophisticated high-tech graphics program called... Yeah, I sort of ran out of budget, but we are going to make this work anyway. Okay, so this is our CD. This is the edge of it, which is cool and sexy and easy to read. And this is the center. It's bad, it stinks, it's everything you hate. That's the center. You gotta avoid the center as much as possible. What Sony did was they asked developers in their official guidelines to put all of the most frequently used data by their game here. Stuff like HUD, textures, menus, it goes here because it's an easy spot to read and it doesn't strain the drive when you gotta reach it. What goes here in the center instead is the less frequently read data, which makes sense. By doing this, you only strain the drive a few times when you gotta reach the less commonly read stuff. The problem is that music on a CD is written from the inside to the outside. Yeah, you always have to start writing your data from the center. The CD-ROM wasn't designed for data, it's just a special version of the CD audio. And yeah, it can store 650 megabytes, but what if your game is smaller than that? You can't just put it here. You gotta find some way to put something before it. For example, Ridge Racer's actual game data is less than 4 megabytes, and the way Namco solved this was by writing a lot of game music before that data. They started writing from the center, put the game music until the very end, and then they put the actual game data where it's easy to read. But what if you don't have music? According to every source I found, what Sony told developers was to put whatever they wanted, because it didn't matter, it wasn't going to be read anyways. It's just a filler, and then after that filler you put the actual data that is going to be read by the PlayStation. And you can probably tell where this is going. If you tell a programmer, especially an underpaid one that is working on a sports game, that he can use whatever he wants as dummy data because it's never going to be read, he's going to use whatever. And that whatever might be a random video file he has on its hard drive that he just renames to zzdummy.dat and puts in the disk. This is the most likely explanation, and it's the most common theory you can find online. And we'll probably never get an actual confirmation because EA did all of the effort I previously mentioned to cover this up. They are trying to make people forget this, not trying to explain what happened. And I know I should end the video here, but I've spent more than 6-7 months on this now. I am not going home without an actual, proper confirmation. So, the plan is pretty simple. What we need is some sort of confessional, a place where EA employees can come and talk about their sins. Oh, okay, I guess Reddit is fine too. This is the Today I Learned subreddit, which is the place where everyone tries to be Adam Conover and either ruin your day or just tell you stuff you didn't even think was possible. And if you go here and search for Tiger Woods 99, you're gonna find several articles reposted about this story, including this Kotaku one from 2011. The article itself is a very well-written article, but it's nothing new. It's just covering what we already said in the video. What is very interesting, though, is what you see when you go in the comments. Because there you find not one, not two, but 3 EA employees. 3 of them straight up telling us what happened. Like, not even trying to hide anything. They just say what they know about the story. I checked their profiles, they are legit, and for some reason, even though these comments have been here since 2014, nobody has ever covered them in one of these articles or in videos. It's just, it seems nobody has noticed this, and apparently with this video, I am the first person to ever connect everything together. So let's take a look at what these people have to say.
I work at EA. The story I've heard about this is that they were just testing some disk space requirements and used the South Park episode just to fill up the disk for testing purposes, but then they obviously forgot it was there and shipped it that way.
Sort of. PSX guidelines require that all disk space be used when the build is submitted for certification. It was up to the developers to fill the buffer space. It was assumed that they wouldn't use inappropriate content. After that, test cases were amended to check all files on a disk.
Yep, I remember doing this. The Sony disk layout tool let you specify the order that files were written to disk, but didn't let you specify hard offsets. So once you had your final layout, you'd create a dummy file to fill the rest of the space, drag that to the start of the layout, thus forcing everything else out to the edge of the physical disk where it would load faster.
Apparently the full story has been hidden here since 2014 and nobody bothered to report on it or check. And the fact that the Sony software to master disks sucked isn't surprising to me. A few months ago I talked to Silent, which is the genius programmer that did stuff like putting the two Gran Turismo shoe discs together in one single disc, which is amazing. And yeah, he told me that when some developers were trying to make an open source alternative to the Sony SDK software to master disks, they discovered that the actual software Sony made was faulty and they had to basically replicate some bugs in order for it to function like the Sony one does. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that the same software doesn't have a feature to make dummy files built in. The only one thing we'll probably never know is if this was actually done because like someone didn't know how to make a dummy file or was in a rush, or if it was a proper prank pulled by one of the developers. Few people would risk their job just to pull a prank like that. And by few people, I mean probably only James May. So I think we can safely assume this was a mistake or just something not done intentionally.
I'm not crazy. I know they put that in on purpose. Compressed in Cinepack. Whereas they could ever make such a mistake. Never. Never. I just couldn't prove it. Their lawyer covered their tracks. They got everyone to ignore this. You think this is something? You think this is bad? This chicanery? EA's done worse. Will Wright. Are you telling me that? A man just happens to fall like that. No, they orchestrated it. Electronic Arts, they killed Burnout. And I downloaded Origin, and I shouldn't have. I put it into my hard drive. What was I thinking? They'll never change. They'll never change. See, ever since 1998, always
Okay, I can understand the animosity of this young fella here, but I have a confession to make, because unfortunately, there aren't 3 employees just telling us the entire story like that. There's 4.
I was there, on the production at EA. I wrote the front end for the game. The story is correct. The episode was on a hard drive, its size was corrected on a test disk, and it was forgotten to replace the file before going gold.
So, I guess that with this, we now know the entire story. This was a mistake. A big mistake that led to one of the weirdest cover-ups in gaming that people forgot, but a mistake. And believe it or not, this video wasn't meant to be a full-fledged investigation. My original plan with this was basically to make a fun video for Halloween, because the game came out on October 31, talking about the cover-up, making some jokes, thanks for watching. But then it grew more and more and more, and I had some problems with my Mac, and while I was fixing those, I discovered even more stuff. And yeah, we made another mystery solved video, I guess, even though this wasn't the plan. The video chose me, I didn't choose the video, okay? Huge thanks to everyone that helped me with this video. Hitsui, everyone that voiced people. So hbomberguy, lowspecalex, Mr. Mario 2011, Kacey, Purmello, and thanks to both Silent and the driver. And thanks to you all for being here and waiting 6 months for a new video. I'll try to be more consistent. This was a very peculiar case because the video grew more and more. I had problems with my computer over and over again. I had stuff IRL that was giving me less time to work on videos. But in the end, I finally solved this mystery. It took 6 months, but I now know everything about a game I never played.